most people don't leave for money issues. They use money as the reason to leave. If somebody gives them 50 cents more an hour or $1 more an hour, but it's generally for the reason they start looking anyway, is that they don't like their boss or they don't like the culture, and all that revolves around leadership.
What's up, guys? Joe McCall, the Real Estate Investing Mastery Podcast. I'm glad you're here. This is also my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership. We're going to be talking about the importance of leadership and the challenges that a lot of folks like you and me have with our own leadership, and where are areas that we can improve to become better leaders in our businesses, in our families, in society, in the community around us. And I got a special guest. His name is Mike McCloskey. This guy has been around for a long, long time, and he's a real good friend of mine because I know his brother. I've known his brother since I got started in real estate way back in 2007. His brother, Sean, helped me get started in the business. We're still good friends today. Sean and I live about 5 minutes apart. And Mike, his brother, was speaking recently at a leadership, what was it called? Business Vision Workshop. And I've heard and seen Mike speak many times. And don't tell Sean this, Mike, but you're a better speaker than him.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. Anyway, but what Mike had to share was really powerful. And every time I've heard him speak, I'm like, man, that's really good. So after he presented at this last workshop, he said, hey, could you be on my podcast? Let's talk about some leadership things, because Mike has been a leader in the corporate world for a long time. And so I always like getting the perspective and feedback from people that are outside of the real estate world, that are understanding, that work with bigger companies. I mean, in real estate, a big company in our real estate world is maybe a company that makes $1 million a year, right? When guys like Mike, they're working with companies that do $50, $100 million a year. And that maybe is a small size company. So we're going to be talking about leadership skills. And this is, if you're new to this business, if you're new, don't check out, because this is going to be important for you to understand, even if you don't want a super big business, but to understand these kinds of leadership skills that are relevant and important for us today. That's what we're going to be talking about. All right. So, but first thing I want to bring to you is this podcast is brought to you by SimpleLandKit.com. And at SimpleLandKit.com, you're going to get all of my best resources and marketing materials and scripts and checklists and calculators and software for flipping vacant land deals. And this is all completely free. Get it right now at SimpleLandKit.com. And also, if you are a subscriber, or if you're not, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, like this video, and comment down below. Let me know if you have any questions. And Mike will be here also later. I'll send him this YouTube video, and he'll answer any questions you guys might have. We're going to give you some links and descriptions, or links in the description to Mike's website, to his company, so you can go there to get more information about all of that. Cool. I think we're ready to go. Let's bring Mike on. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Awesome. I'm glad you're here. I'm using a new tool today called Riverside to record this podcast. So I'm hoping it works. I think it is. I've been flipping cameras here. Hopefully my video guys can edit that and make it work. So we'll see. But I'm glad you're here, Mike.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the invite. It's always fun catching up with you. And I feel like I just saw you a couple of weeks ago at an event, and that was really fun. And it's good catching up, man.
Yes, it is. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about leadership.
Sure.
You have a unique perspective too, because you've been in the big corporate world and you work with big corporate companies, but you also have seen the smaller mom and pop shops when you go and speak at some of Sean's workshops and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Let me just ask you a brief overview question. I mean, do the same leadership principles apply to the small business as it does the big corporate businesses?
Ironically, yes. Most people don't think they do, but they definitely do. We work with companies that have 30,000 people, and we work with companies that have 2 people. And so it doesn't really matter the size of the company. Our kind of joke within our organization is, if you've got people problems, and it generally revolves around leadership. And so that's what we focus on. So it doesn't really matter to us what size company it is, but yes, the same problems persist throughout any size company.
Size doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That's a relief, Mike. All right. Anyway, you've got. See, this is funny because Mike and Sean have very similar sense of humor, and So that was funny for multiple reasons. All right. So leadership, what is it? How do you define it? What's a good place to start with this?
Well, the funny thing is, there's lots of ways to define it. It's really the interesting piece is that we've traveled all over the place. We've been in several different states, working with different companies now in about 48 different states, and we have found that there is a lack of leadership in almost every level of the organization. And what we found is that there are 6 things. We all got together, our team, we've got about 16 people on our team, consultants, strictly consultants, plus a lot of support. And last summer we sat down and said, what's going on with like some of the biggest things we're seeing as misses out there in the field? Like, what's the biggest gap? And we put a lot of things on the whiteboard, but there were 6 common themes that kept coming up over and over and over and over again. One of the biggest things was this need for, understanding yourself. And I talked a lot about that. As a matter of fact, that was the presentation you saw me do just a few weeks ago on understanding yourself and the importance of that. And we've got tools and assessments to help with that and figure out, the types of leader that the kind of category you're going to fall into and so on. But there were 6 things. And so, we created this leadership foundational course around that. But those 6 things were so prevalent that it was almost shocking to me. But I'm sure we'll touch base on a few of them today. Probably won't have time to go through in detail all of them, but it was really interesting. One was, just self-awareness, having a high level of self-awareness. Cornell University did this really cool study not too long ago that said that self-awareness was the number 1 predictor of success for a leader and a leadership group. And it was also the number 1 predictor of whether or not the company was going to have a healthy bottom line. So we start with that just to kind of kick it off a little bit.
So these are 6 things that you find in good leaders in good companies.
These are 6 things that we found that people struggled with the most that are foundational core competencies in leadership. And so when we were going through, we said, okay, so some of the leadership teams that you're working with, where do they seem to struggle? And so as we were making the list as individuals, pointing those things out, we noticed those 6 things were very common themes for areas they were struggling in.
Okay, good. Can we talk about them?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Yeah. First one is self-awareness. Right. Can you just list the 6 and then we'll talk about each of them?
Sure. There's self-awareness. There's leading through communication, leading communication and conflict, I should say. There's how to lead people legally. There is always an issue with people saying things and doing things they should not say, whether it's during the hiring process. And it's not just the basic things like, what religion are you? And, those basic things that we kind of already know. But there's a lot of legalities to leading people, clearly that we talk about in our session. There's leading team performance. There's leading a team through change. There are, and another just leadership strategic practices that we talk about. But the first one we always start off with is the self-awareness piece, like I said. And we found that when we fix or work on these with a team, that it fixes about 90% of all of the other issues in the company. Because most of the time it's, conflict resolution or change or, things like that, leading people in general, and having some self-accountability, by far fix almost everything. And so that's why we started with those things. And
why is that?
Well, why is it that what specifically?
Well, when you fix self-awareness,
if
it helps fix 90% of the other problems of
those
conflict.
Those 6 things, when we fix those 6
things.
Oh,
okay. I see. Self-awareness, leading through conflict, leading people legally, leading people with performance.
Leading your team's performance, yep.
And then change, leading them through change. What was there another one?
And then strategic leadership practices. So helping people understand the vision that you or the company or both, if you're the owner, are looking towards hitting. And then how do you share that vision? How do you inspire that shared vision with your team so that they feel like they want to come in and do all the things that you are really excited about? Okay. So that's a whole another topic in itself, for sure. That's
a
2-hour
you could write a whole book about all of. You could write a whole book about all of this.
For sure, we're working on it right now. As a matter of fact.
Oh, good. Yeah. And you're not writing with AI, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
No.
good. There's a trend right now. Everybody thinks that
stories.
Oh, geez. There's people out there thinking that they can just use AI to write this book and everybody's going to love it.
No,
bothers me. Okay.
We've got enough stories and enough, analogies that we don't need to use artificial intelligence to write a book.
Good. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the first one, self-awareness. What does that mean?
So having an understanding of who you are, there's a few things we look at. One is there are different drives that all of us have, and those drives are translated into behaviors that people see. So there's 4 that we look at. There's really dominance. There is, how big your dominance is, how much is your need for control, over the people and projects around you, things like that. Then there's your extroversion, how much social interaction with your team or your clients do you want? Versus other people. And there's a patience level, and that is defined a little bit differently than the normal patience that you and I would normally think about. That is more lined up with how much change you are wanting to drive in your company. You've heard all these, business owners that say, I make it rain. We do all these things to, cause craziness in our company, and they kind of pride themselves on it, but their staff is kind of pulling their hair out, quite a bit, trying to figure things out along the way. And then we look at formality, that need for rules and structure, and all of those things, all of those drives that people have are usually translated into some kind of behaviors that we can see and watch and kind of understand. And when you display those behaviors, that has a ripple effect on the company. And so depending on the topic, that could have a very positive ripple effect, or it could be, very detrimental to the team around you, depending on, of course, what the topic is. And so we spend a lot of time talking about what kind of drives a person has so that they can understand their behaviors. And then, of course, if they can understand the team around them and how they like to do business, we can tell them exactly when those drives would be very favorable for their role and when they might be struggling in that role. So it's pretty insightful. We've got a couple of assessments that we use for that to kind of get us going, kind of get the juices flowing a little bit. But overall, it's a pretty fascinating thing that most people don't understand, the ripple effect piece.
So is this where you use the predictive index?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. Talk about that, because this is one of the main tools you use when you do presentations. The predictive index, give the little history about that and how powerful it is. And how could somebody actually take one of these and do it for themselves?
So first of all, if you want to take one, you can go to my website. It's humanlytics.com. So human and then lytics.com. Basically, it's data and analytics on people. That's kind of how we came up with that. And so there's a tab on there for free assessment. You can get it. It'll be a basic assessment that we'll give you. So you're not going to get all of the information, but we can supply that for you as well if you would like to schedule a call with us. So that's no problem. And there's ways to connect with us on the website as well. But it's fascinating because it shares those 4 drives that we were talking about. It goes really in depth with those. And it tells me how you currently feel the need to adapt for your business as well. And the more somebody has to adapt, the more stress I know they're under. And so what we try to do is get leaders in any level of the company in their kind of like that unique genius zone, so they can be in that realm of their own natural drives at any given time, and they don't have to change a lot. Now, on occasion, they'll have to, right? We're in business. We all have to change to adapt. But we use predictive index specifically because it's been around a long time. It's been around since 1955. It was actually invented, the beginning of it was invented in World War II. And so it's EEOC compliant, so you can use it for hiring. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, basically. And so it's just something that's been around for such a long time. And with over 500 validity studies, we just know that it works really, really well. And according to Harvard, it's got a 98.6% accuracy rate. So we won't use anything else in our business.
I love this test because I hate every other personality test. It takes too long. I get annoyed with 500 questions.
Right.
And it's just, I get irritated. And by the end of it, I was always like, you have anger issues. That's what it tells me. It's not because I do. Yeah. It's like, I hate those tests, but this thing, right, you can get it done in like 5 minutes.
Yep. 6 minutes at the most, 7 minutes if you're really taking your time. And the most amazing thing of all is there's no questions. So It's not a personality test per se. It really allows us to understand what your drives are, or how you like to do business. And then when we translate that into behaviors, a lot of people think of that as personalities, but it's really a drives assessment. And so when you're done with that, we'll be able to tell you, really where your natural drives come out in your current role. And generally speaking, we can tell you exactly where you need to adapt as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
And the great thing about it is it's incredibly accurate. When you see, when it gives you your report, you're like, oh my gosh, he got all of that from just a few questions.
Yeah.
But also it's great for your team. It's great for figuring out, okay, well, this is how I operate, these are my drives. And then what kind of people do you need around you to support you and build your team with, right?
That's right. So when what we find is a lot of people have, they say, oh, I can't, it's so hard to find good people these days. And it's so hard to, keep good people these days. And so that's why we kind of came up with the phrase of, are you talent repellent? Most people have really good people on the team or have hired good people, and they actually drive them away, which is really interesting. Most people don't leave for money issues. They use money as the reason to leave. If somebody gives them 50 cents more an hour or $1 more an hour, but it's generally for the reason they start looking anyway, is that they don't like their boss or they don't like the culture, and all that revolves around leadership.
Yeah.
It's a big issue in the industry, especially today. People will just pack up and leave. They'll just ghost you. They won't show up to interviews. If they kind of sense that, they'll just be there for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And next thing you know, they're just gone. You never, ever hear from them again. And so our role is to try to eliminate all that, to make sure that the entire team is cohesive at every level, from hire to retire.
I love that. Okay. So the 6 things again for the leadership competencies that you need to have nailed down. Number 1 is know yourself, self-awareness, what drives you, right?
Right.
And that starts with the predictive index test.
Right.
Anything else you want to add to that before we move on?
No, I think that's it. That's incredibly important. That we just use that as a stepping stone to start the conversation. All the rest will come in through the coaching that we'll give you. But that's just kind of gives us a starting point to help us understand who we're talking to.
Yeah. Let's talk about leading through conflict then. This is the other important competency that leaders need to have, understanding, because conflict will come whether you like it or not. Right. No matter how big of a team or how small of a team you have, there will be conflict. So why is this so important?
Well, there is, I think some people actually, try to eliminate conflict. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is they just don't like it. They feel like it's just something they don't want to deal with because they hate confrontations. And that's an issue in itself. And the other is they think it's unhealthy. And that's not true at all. How you handle the conflict could be healthy. And sometimes conflict can be healthy. For example, we sit in some boardrooms with different companies and the leadership teams, and somebody will bring something up that somebody else doesn't want to talk about. So they just kind of squash it, or they decide to move forward with some project that they know is kind of a dump project that shouldn't be worked on, but no one has the ability, or, they don't feel they have the ability based on the culture generally to share what's on their mind, share what they should be thinking. And so, they think, well, that's just going to cause conflict. I don't want to have those conversations with people. But conflict is very, very healthy when it's done with respect for the roles that each person has around the table. And it's okay to disagree. People disagree all the time. We've kind of lost that subtle art of saying, hey, you know what? I don't see where you're going here. I don't like this idea. I don't think it's going to be good for the company. I don't think it's going to be good for the people, whatever the situation is. It could be conflict thought of like that. It could be conflict of, just one person doesn't get along with another person because they're very, very different. It could be a couple of different forms of conflict, but all of it to a certain degree is healthy if you're really sharing what's on your mind to get to a cure for something versus just arguing about crap, quite honestly.
All right, good. So give some tips on how to do this.
Sure. Well, first of all, understand that in most situations, the other person is really doing their best to bring a really good idea to the table. So it's not like, just because they disagree with your idea or you disagree with theirs, it doesn't mean they're saying it just to tick you off, right? I mean, they have more, generally more, better things to do than that. And so just know that everyone, if they're all focused on the vision of the company and trying to filter their ideas through the core values of the company, everybody is doing their best. That's kind of how you have to look at it. Everybody's doing their best to work towards that vision. And if you kind of look at people like that, you say, okay, we might disagree on this particular issue, and neither one of us may not be the final decision maker. But at least if everybody says their piece and everybody says what's on their mind in a respectful way, most times they can get around that. It's actually more simple than not. There's several books on it. There's fierce conversations on things like this. There's crucial conversations. We take a look at a person's predictive index results, and I can tell you almost instantly where the conflict is coming from, what the argument sounds like. And sometimes it's just people saying, oh, you know what, these things aggravated me about you, but I didn't realize I could really use them to my benefit to look at and solve a problem differently. And so once they learn to master those strengths in each other and utilize them, that's half the battle right there. So 9 times out of 10, we can fix those issues very, very quickly. It's almost all of them we can fix, but it just takes longer.
Yeah, I would say it's more than half the battle. Just understanding where they're coming from and why, and they understanding where you're coming from. And you realize, oh, we actually have more in common. We want the same thing.
Right.
That understanding is super important. And something like
sorry,
go ahead.
When we have, when we do events and I'm giving presentations, whether it's to a mastermind group or to a corporation for their annual retreat or whatever, we bring people up on stage and actually do these kind of readbacks with them from their predictive index results. And sometimes it's business partners. Sometimes it's just two peers that are working with each other that have some conflict. And in some cases, it's married couples too. They'll come up and we'll talk to them. And as a matter of fact, I did that a little bit. We had a husband and wife team that were there at that event, and we started talking a little bit about their differences and how that could be perceived as friction if they don't understand, all of the benefits of those differences working together. It's kind of like, I think of me, right? I've got a little bit lower formality than the average person. That's that drive for rules and structure. But I surround myself with people that have that so that we have it really well in the company. Great specific example of that would be like my bookkeeper, right? I mean, I can do the job. It doesn't mean I like the job. I could do the job if I really needed to. But it's not something I'm really passionate about. I'm not, loving it. He loves it. He loves every minute of it. He's got the right profile for it. And when, people, I may not understand him always in the way he thinks, but I value the gifts that he brings with his different type of thinking and his different type of profile.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Let's talk about leading people legally.
Yes.
Why is obeying the law a big deal?
Oh, it's not if you want to go to jail or get sued or anything else. It's not that big of a deal. Leading others legally, it's one of those things where we find that people say things and do things that they don't even think are, necessarily just an HR issue, right? And that all falls under legal in many cases, many companies, I should say. And so, of course, everybody kind of knows the basics of this. You can't ask about religion or race or sexual orientation, things like that during interviews. But it's all kinds of other things. Even people that have conversations. If you and I were having a conversation in the break room about something that you and I both thought was maybe a little bit funny, but somebody else thought it was, off color and, they weren't happy with it, we could literally be sued personally and professionally. And that a lot of times people think, well, I'm protected by the umbrella of the company. And that's not always true, especially when you're in a leadership position. And so we actually go through parts of the law and talk to you about, hey, these are the things you can say. These are the things you can't say. And by the way, this class that we offer called the Leadership Apex, this is actually a 6-week class. And so it's for active people in workplaces that can't get out to take some courses. And so it's only 2 hours a week on Zoom. And you can join the class anytime. We've got one every single month, 2 hours a week. And we talk about one topic each week. And there's a little bit of homework. So be prepared for a little bit of homework. But that's when you'll be partnered up with somebody else to talk about some of the legal aspects. Everybody will be signed a part of the legal code that you have to kind of talk to and possibly present on if you're chosen or volunteer. But there's a lot in this category that this is the one where most people say, I knew the basics, but I didn't know that. No matter what that is, they didn't know something in there.
So give us one or two of the top biggest things and some tips that we could do to protect ourselves as business owners on the legal side of things.
Well, the number one thing is just know what the laws are, because most people think that if I didn't say something directly to that person, then I'm okay with it. It's okay. A lot of it has to do with, firing people depending on your state, with no paperwork. You just got aggravated with them one day and you fired them. There's no paperwork. There's no coaching involved. In some cases, you can fire at will. But then that, kind of starts a downward spiral of, what's the culture like at that company? Other people on your team are starting to say, hey, what happened to, Joe? He was here last week and now he's not here. And now he's, Joe's going around saying he had no warnings for anything. So that starts to defeat the culture. But just knowing the law, quite honestly, is almost all of it. Most people just don't have a clue what the rules are around that.
All right. So knowing the law, give us some other tips real quick on like what you can say and not say when you're just joking around with somebody, or you're on a Zoom and you say some stupid joke like, oh, thank God size doesn't matter. But I might offend somebody who has a small thingy, and like, so give us some tips on that.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, sorry for the stupid joke.
Sure. No, it's fine. One of the most recent things actually was somebody who was on a group call in a company, a lot of people in this company. And they were watching some show where there was somebody that had an accent, right? And so they get on talking in that accent, and it was from a different language or a different country, right? And so, and he made it like kind of like the funny, like the butt end of a joke, and made it sound like not only was the accent not just funny, but actually kind of made them sound like they were a little stupid. And so the one person on that call correlated that voice with stupid now because it was a joke that he had heard in that, that kind of accent. And so that caused a really, really big issue. And then there were, a lot of harsh things said about the company. And there was a potential lawsuit that almost got started because this company discriminates against this particular race of people. So it turned into something that was really, really big, and it was meant incredibly innocently. But regardless of intent, that person could have been sued again, not just through the company, but directly. And so we're trying to protect people from stuff like that.
So just because Michael Scott does it on The Office doesn't mean you can do it.
That's right. He is a good example of a bad example.
So just watch The Office and don't do anything he does.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're done with the course. That's all you need to know.
That's it. Okay.
Right.
All right. Leading people through performance. What does that mean?
Yes. So now you've got the right people involved. We've helped you hire the right people, and you've got them on board. And now it's how do you model the way? How do you inspire them to do really, really well and coach, train, and develop them to peak performance? And so we talk about everything from, doing a weekly touch base with them to, quarterly reviews to annual reviews. What should those sound like? What are you trying to accomplish? Is there some sort of, even though they've got their own tasks to do, are they living for something bigger within the organization? What does your organization stand for? What is its vision? What are the core values? And I mentioned core values several times, but we talk about that quite a bit in this performance piece because all of the feedback that we give our team members is all around the core values and how they're living them out. So we don't just talk about specific tasks they did when we praise them. We talk about how that particular task lined up with the core values. So they're constantly thinking about core values. And that's what we revolve the performance numbers around.
Okay, good. So give us some tips then on that.
Sure. Well,
number one, you got to have some core values written down, right?
100%. Yeah. It's funny. I walk into these companies all the time and I say, hey, tell me a little bit about your core values. And they say, oh, we live by them. We breathe them day in and day out. As you can see, Mike, they're on our walls all over the place. And I say, great. And I separate the leadership team out into areas by themselves. And I say, okay, here's a piece of paper, write them down. And most of the times they have no clue what they are. The words are all jumbled. They don't live by any of them. And so it's funny, they talk to them, but it's more of like a, check mark, like, okay, we're done with the core values. But again, we teach companies to give structured feedback, whether that is praise, or some constructive feedback around the core values. So for example, if one of yours is just making something up, we wow every customer. Like, so every customer that comes in contact with me leaves going, oh my gosh, that was the greatest experience ever. So I would say, hey, Joe, how you demonstrated with that last customer, our core value of making sure every customer is wowed. When you did this, that was genius. I loved it. Thank you so much. So now Joe's going to think of everything he does through the core value, not just the thing that he did, but the overall bigger vision of wowing customers. And then if I'm talking to him in private and I say, hey, Joe, our core value is, to wow every single customer that we come in contact with. Here's where I feel you could do that even more. And that's how we would give constructive feedback in private. And so again, everything filters through those things. And now they're thinking, okay, instead of just repeating the one act that I did, what other things can I do that would also give me accolades for that core value? And then everybody starts looking for them and sharing them. It works out incredibly well. People are moved by it, and a lot of positive things come from that.
I remember when I worked in corporate America, our company, I worked for 3 different companies, and they all had core values that were very prominent. And I tried hard to memorize them, but I always had a hard time, like, because we had to, like, in some of my companies I worked for, we had to evaluate ourselves based on the core values, and then they would evaluate us. But some of them I was like, I'm just this, I was a civil engineer, and I was like, I'm just a number crunching guy. Like, how does, sometimes the core values were so kind of ethereal and up there in the sky. I couldn't connect with how to make it work on practical day-to-day stuff that I'm doing every day. And then how do I figure out my job performance reviews and my evaluations based on something I don't even understand, that I have nothing to do with? Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example, but I'm falling short. Do you have any tips on, like, creating core values that are practical, that are simple, and not some pie in the sky, something way up here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned like ChatGPT earlier. Do not get them from there. Do not Google them. Right. And so we'll start with that. But I would say get your leadership team together. If you've got a leadership team, if you're a solopreneur, then, sit down in a room for a while and just lock the door and say, what is it that I want my company to stand for? What is it that every single time, we accomplish something, I want it to align up with these things. And again, if you're a solopreneur, you'll find a lot of your personal core values pop up in this. If you're a business, you'll find many, many different ones come up, because everybody will have different ideas. But at the end of the day, and they can be tweaked a little bit over time, but at the end of the day, people really need to understand, when they're interviewing for the job, they are actually coming on board to fulfill those core values. And so, whether you are a numbers cruncher and you look at, spreadsheets all day long, the work you do allows us to achieve these core values for our clients and for our business. And if they can't see the connection there, that's a big gap. That's a really big gap. So that's why we talk to it in feedback terms as well. Again, the constructive and the praise. But I would definitely sit down and say, okay, what resonates with me? You might need to Google something to kind of get some ideas to spark, some ideas, but don't let them be your ideas. Make sure that you come up with your own that you can truly stand behind, so that they mean something to you. Because you're right, if you can't understand what matches or how that works for you, then it's never going to work. But we always make sure that the interviews we do, every single person understands the core values of the company. And then we basically say, if you choose, after we find out they're a good fit, obviously, if you choose to follow the core values, we'd love to have you on our team. If you choose one day not to follow the core values of the company, no problem at all. We just wish you would go work with somebody else. That's all we ask. And you can choose to go work for somebody else, or we can help you with that. But either way, these are the core values that we follow, and we want everybody to live by them. How does that make you feel? And most people say, makes you feel good, whatever. And then we talk about it way more than they ever expected. And then they generally make up their mind. But most people, when they know up front, they're going to be okay with it.
Good, good. By the way, do you have a few more minutes?
I do.
Can we keep on going?
Yeah, I do.
All right. The fourth one is leading people through change.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So, first of all, there's been a lot of change, in business over the last several years, right? And so every company that just stays stagnant is going to be left behind 100% of the time. And I'm not talking about change just because there's nothing better to do, but I'm talking about change and, through adapting to deliver a better promise for your customers, or to keep up with a competitor, or to continue to crush a competitor, right? Depending on how you look at that or where you're at in the food chain, so to speak. But there are a lot of people that really struggle with change. And a good example of that is going back to the predictive index. We know if somebody has a really high formality and a very high patience level, that they have a very hard time with change. A lot of times they want to know the reasons why. And so once they understand the why behind it, they're all good. And so it's funny, I used to be the director of learning and development for a company that had about 60,000 people. And so I did all the leadership competency training for all leaders from Chicago to Hawaii. And somebody said, hey, we're going to go through this big change. We're going to buy out a company and then maybe another one next year. And they're going to be big companies. And they said, you need to come up with some kind of training to help people go through change. I thought that was the dumbest thing on the planet, because, I'm driving change in my own business. I'm totally fine with it. Why can't everybody be more like me?
Right.
And then I realized, when you have a very high patience level, those are the kind of like the steady Eddie people, in the company that do an incredible job day in and day out of doing what, some people might consider like routine work, right? Those folks do an incredible job, but because they pride themselves on doing great work all the time, they don't like to change processes too often. They don't like to change policies or things like that. And so you need a little bit of extra hand holding to understand the reason for the change. And you know what? Sometimes I've realized that some leaders can't come up with a good reason for some of the change. And if that's the case, I say, well, why don't you think about if now's the right time for it, or if it's really ever the right time? Because some leaders just make change happen because it makes them feel good, right? I've got a new product. Does it line up with our core values? Does it line up with our vision? Does it line up with our mission statement? Not really, but I think we can make money on it. Well, those are the kind of things, that just aggravate a team half the time.
So I guess understanding yourself is important in all this, understanding why you want this change. And is this something that is really important?
Right. And is it needed?
Why?
Sometimes it's needed in the fourth quarter, but not needed right now. And so why are we pushing this right now when the team could have, 10 things on their plate that they're currently working on? And, you need to either help them take one or two things off before you give them something else, or, postpone it till when it's really actually due, or just eliminate it altogether. But there's going to be change. There's going to be a lot of change in companies, and some of it is, most of it's really warranted and needed to keep up with the changing times. And so they need to be prepared for it. And
usually I think the leader, the visionary, is more usually somebody who can accept change, wants the change, and is okay with it. But usually people who are more implementers, more operators, more, what's the word I'm looking for? Integrators.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
They're more resistant to the change, right? Because they're more like, I just want to implement what you want, the vision, but the vision keeps on changing. So like, you're making my job hard. Stop it.
Yeah.
That's part of the
whether that's
big
reality or just perception. They believe that the vision keeps changing when it's not necessarily the vision all the time. It's just the tactic to hit the vision is sometimes needing to change. That's exactly right. Yeah. When we find that most visionaries, for example, CEOs, they've been working on this change in their mind for a really, really long time. This isn't some new idea to them, but they don't always share their thoughts with the team. And so they'll sit back and they'll say, okay, you know what? I've been thinking about this for 6 months, guys. This is what I think we should do. And now it's just implement it. We're going to do it by Friday, right? Next week. And so it throws the team off. So what has been, kind of simmering in your head for 6 months to a year is now an immediate emergency. And so that's really confusing for the implementing team because they think everything that you say is an emergency. So what makes this any different? Is this going to go away in 90 days like the last 3 projects did, or is this a true lasting change that we need for the company? What they really, really hate is the flavor of the month. Can't stand it. And they think everything that a CEO says is that.
I am so guilty of that. Okay.
Your team probably loves you then.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes not. 1,
Right.
2, 3, 4, 5. All right. The fifth one is I wrote down strategic leadership practices. What is that?
Yep, that's basically the sixth. That's the sixth one. We were just off one in the numbers. That's the sixth one. So, with sometimes this is just really the visionary piece, right? How do we help our team understand what the vision is and living that mission statement, and helping them, with just helping our team through just our basic understanding of our role. So we talk about everything from modeling the way to inspiring a shared vision to challenging the process, encouraging others, enabling others to act, really the rest of the foundational pieces that we could kind of put all into a 2-hour session to talk about, which, by the way, every single one of those is also, and could be a half-day session if we wanted them to be. But like model the way, for example, most times people don't ever lead by example. They just, do what I say and not as I do. And that's not a good thing. And so we talk to that quite a bit. Inspiring a shared vision. It's how do we get people around us to see what we're really going for, and not that they are assigned a task, they're assigned a vision. And this is the role you play in that vision. Right. And then challenging the process, that kind of goes back to that conflict resolution, or creating conflict, a healthy conflict. And so how do I challenge the process to the status quo? How can we do things differently, better, or streamline, getting to the root cause of issues, things like that. Encourage the heart. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of leaders out there that encourage the process, not the heart, because remember, there are humans doing the processes, not robots. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
Hopefully that day doesn't come soon. For some areas of business, I should say. And so, we got to remember we're working with human beings that, they have personal things going on. They've got, business things. They've got career goals and aspirations. And sometimes we only focus on the actual task. So we talk about that quite a bit. And then enable others to act. Enable others to act is, in my opinion, based on all of my personal experiences, the biggest, most dramatic change for people when they first become a leader. They came from being an implementer, the doer person. Now they're overseeing all of the doers. And so, to a certain extent, they think, well, you know what? No one can do it as well as I can. I've been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was. And so they have a hard time letting go. So instead of holding people accountable to the standards that they had when they got their role, which helped get them promoted, they would rather just say, you know what, you're probably going to miss your deadline here. I'll just do it for you. And that is a big struggle. So we want to enable others to act and not, take their job from them. We want to actually have them feel like, hey, you know what, we're holding you accountable to the job you're doing through praise for all the times you get it right. And, we're excited to be in your corner, but we are not the implementers anymore.
That's a big shift.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah, it is.
There are lots of different levels in leadership that people go through. The higher you go up, the less tasks you actually do. And most people struggle when they grow up in a company from, kind of like the bottom rung, for lack of a better phrase for it, up to like a CEO position. And most smaller companies, and smaller business CEOs have never gone through any of those steps. They just started the business and started hiring people around them. So they don't understand any level from entry level position to CEO. And so they have a hard time understanding the struggles that one level might be going through. And that puts a lot of stress on people.
That's the whole, what got you here won't get you there.
That's right. That's right. And a good example of that is, let's say Michael Jordan, right? Greatest basketball player of all time. People argue about that, but I think he is. And so, you look at him as a player for the Bulls, amazing leader. No one would ever say he wasn't a good leader. I mean, he was really, really good. He drove the talent on that team. And if somebody was having an off day, he encouraged them. He modeled the way for sure. He was inspiring. He encouraged all those different things we just talked about. And his record, though, as an owner with the Charlotte Hornets, same leader, was completely opposite. He was a 70, I think he won 75% of all of his games, 72% as a Bulls player, and only won like 37% as a Bulls owner. Different level of leadership. And so those same skills that got you here won't get you there. Perfect example of that, Joe.
Was he a manager ever or coach?
He was not. No, he went straight to owner.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. When you get that kind of money, it's easy to buy a team.
Yeah, probably is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you,
how
man.
can people reach out to you, get more information from you? Do you do the social media stuff, or are you on LinkedIn?
I do. We've got a YouTube channel. We actually just started because we've been a lot of people have been reaching out saying, hey, we need some help. So we do that. We're on LinkedIn a lot. We work with a lot of HR departments first, generally speaking. But if you don't have an HR department, that's no problem. We don't care about that. Like I said, we work with companies that have 2 people or tens of thousands of people. But you can go to our website at humanlytics.com, humanlytics.com. And there's a thing on there, a tab on there for the Leadership Apex that you can learn more about it. There's an assessments tab on there. Our 800 number is on there. You can reach out anytime, and we'll be happy to take good care of you.
Yeah, awesome. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link will be in the description down below. Thank you so much, Mike. Have a good one.
Thank you, Joe. Good seeing you again.
When are we seeing you next? When are you going to come down to St. Louis?
That's a great question. Probably in July, I think, is my next visit to St. Louis.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. I'll see you then.
We'll see you. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.